There we go. Good morning. Good morning. I always like New Direction because it always takes us like twice as long to turn around and greet your neighbor as anywhere else. And there's always like, this is the fun part about staying up here. There's always like one person that's the last person to get in their seat because they go way too far to hug somebody. Usually it's Michelle. And there's two today. I'm not going to call their names, but I saw you. Anyway. If you're new this morning, my name's Matthew Gallery. I'm the lead pastor here. We're glad to have you. We actually mean that. We are glad to have you. We try to make it very easy and accommodating for you to come in, find the new stuff, find the coffee, find the donuts if you're like me. But anyway, I hope you just got a good Christian welcome this morning. And we mean it. You are a family here at New Direction, and we try to treat you like that. But as Michelle kind of did a little spoiler alert a while ago, I got a little bit different of a sermon this morning. Yeah. I got a little bit different of a message this morning because I'm not preaching from the Bible. Somebody said, I'm preaching about the Bible. Oh, yeah, it's kind of different now. But see, and I was sitting there, and I usually try to pull together some resources and stuff when I'm preaching about a sermon. And I did a Google search, as I always do on things, because you always like to take different things that people find and kind of include them in. I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the world, believe it or not. And there's some people out there that might have other wise things to say. So I did a Google search. I said, somebody has spoken somewhere about the Bible before. And to my surprise, I searched for like 2 days and I couldn't really find a sermon about this, you know, the whole thing. There's plenty of sermons from the Bible, but to my knowledge, this is the first time anyone's actually tackled preaching about what this book in and of itself means. And I kind of got that idea and that confirmation I was supposed to speak about this Sunday. I was perusing Facebook one night this week. I don't know where that word came from. I didn't even know I knew that word. Peruse. Sometimes sometimes the Holy Spirit gets a hold of me up here and I just don't know what I'm talking about. I was browsing Facebook to go more Greene County style, and I looked at just a mutual friend that me and Michelle have, and I saw this status, and I was thinking, wow, like this is someone that really has it together. I'm not really going to say what they were talking about, but it made it very clear that they had no clue about what the Bible was really about. And I don't mean to knock her on that, but I was like, man, like this is somebody that should know, like what it's about. Like, should get the big picture in this whole deal. And I got to thinking about that. And I got to thinking, man, if you could just get the big picture of what it means, then maybe, like, as you're sitting there doing your Bible studies, especially as you're just starting off as a Christian, as you're sitting there looking at it, maybe you can have a clue as to what it's talking about a little bit better. Because I started reading the Bible, like, every day when I was probably about 12 years old. That's really where like I started looking at it. Now, I did it for the wrong reasons because I thought that if I didn't read the Bible every day when I was 12, then I thought the Lord was like going to smite me and just knock me off the face of the planet. I did it for the wrong reasons, but I started reading it when I was 12 years old. It finally clicked, literally like one day when I was 26 years old. And I don't want it to take you guys 14 years for it to suddenly click and it to suddenly make a lot more sense to you. Okay, and one of my things about this, one of my illustrations, we're going to do a little exercise this morning. I'm going to read a couple of notes from a mystery book I have up here. I want to just read a couple of notes, a couple of sentences, and you guys try to tell me what on earth I'm talking about, okay? Let's see here. Let's just flip randomly here. Okay. The buttons on the side will snap into place when secured. You might know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Alright then, y'all looking at me like I'm crazy. Alright, let's find another here. Squeeze handle to allow rods to drop into holes. Oh yeah. That's step 2, by the way. That's step 2. Y'all all looking at me like I'm nuts and I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, y'all still don't know what I'm talking about. I can't believe it. If body support pillows are not needed, you can remove them by accessing the underside as shown. Y'all still don't know what I'm talking. I mean, geez, like, okay, let's see. Do not use in motor vehicles. See, this is what y'all... to just kind of cut a long story short here, this is actually... you were close with a bassinet. This is actually my kid's high chair instruction manual that I put together this past week, right? Okay. Now, if I said that you knew I was talking about putting together a high chair, and I read some of those things, and I read them in order, it might make a little more sense to you. And when I said, like, you know, remove the seat cover to access the underside, you might say, okay, I know what he's talking about because there's a pad on a high chair, and that's what he's talking about. When I read a warning to you to not use in motor vehicles, you might be able to say, oh, because you're not supposed to put a high chair in a car and drive down the road at 80 miles an hour. It'll make a little more sense to you. My point behind all of that is when you see the big picture of what you're trying to put together, like the little details make a little bit more sense to you. And you can kind of know the order of the way they go and stuff. The Bible is very, very similar. It's very complicated, but it's very simple too. Once you understand the big picture, as you're doing your daily devotions, which I hope you do at the end of the sermon, as you're getting on your YouVersion app and reading your Bible, whether it's at lunch hour or whatever, I hope as you're reading those details, you can see where those pieces go a little bit more. Now I'm about to give you guys the big picture of the Bible. You ready for it? Okay, God created you. He wanted you to be His children and stuff. Okay, we sinned. We messed it up. Everything since that point has been Him trying to get you back in the relationship with Him. That's it. That's it. That's the big picture of the Bible. And if you can understand that, if you can keep that in your mind when you're reading all the little history and about the nations, and we're going to get in that in a second, and about the tribes of Israel, and about the New Testament and the Old Testament, and about all the apostles and what they were writing about, then it will make more sense to you. Suddenly, when you read about the Ten Commandments, it's not just the rules and regulations from a God that wants to put you under His thumb, but it's a message from Daddy God saying, hey, if you do this, your life's going to be better. And you're going to be protected from yourself. And you're going to have a whole lot better, easier life. Like suddenly when you realize like what God was doing in the nation of Israel, you'll suddenly realize like, oh, God was telling a story through Israel. Rather than it just being some boring history book as we oftentimes look at it. And what I want to do is I want to take it and I want to look at it in a little bit different way of what you're used to looking at this book. Most of us look at it as Old Testament and New Testament. And to break it down a little bit further for you guys, I tend to break it down into 3 chapters to kind of help myself understand what God was doing during each part of the Bible and what God's intention was behind it. That's some good water. They shampooed the carpets in here this week, and like I got a little carried away with the Febreze before church started, so if it smells like Febreze, but it smelled like Bigfoot's armpit when I came in here this morning. So I don't know, I just, you know, we went to the mountains a couple weeks ago. I saw 3 of them, but you know, anyway. Okay, what I like to do to separate the Bible is I usually like to take the first 2 chapters of the Bible, and that's like really, it's 1 page really in my Bible, like the first 2 chapters in the Bible, and separate it all in itself. Because the first 2 chapters, you know what, that's the only part of the Bible is, that's the way God created it, and that's the way God wanted it. That was before humans had their say-so, and humans really screwed things up. The first 2 chapters of the Bible is the way God wanted the world. He wanted it to be good and perfect. It says in Genesis chapter 1 verse 31, then God looked over all He had made, and He saw that it was very good. Like God didn't make this world to be what it was, but God made a perfect world, and He put you in it. And like we walked around with God and we talked with God. I don't know, maybe played ping pong with God. I don't know what we did back then. But like that's the way it was supposed to be. And then one day man sinned and he said he was going to do things his own way. And that caused a divide between us and God, because God is so holy And God is so righteous that he can't stand to be even in the presence of sin. So as long as we were sinful creatures, he couldn't stand to be around us. Like that's just his character. It wasn't his choice. But God's so holy, he couldn't stand it. And so everything since then has been God bringing us back to that. So for the rest of the Old Testament, what God did, and this is what people get really, really messed up and really shook up on, is the Old Testament. Because if you read the Old Testament, you're reading about this nation called Israel most of the time, and you're thinking like, this is a history book of Israel. I don't get it. It's like a history book. Why is this nation of Israel so important? Well, God was smart. I like that little meme, like that guy doing like this. God was smart. And he knows how to tell a story and get us to believe him. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying like, well, Matthew, why didn't God just like write down one book one day or just like tell one person? And God tried that for a while with like guys like Noah and like Enoch and all those guys before Abraham. He was like kind of try to be with each person individually, but really people just weren't up to the task and they were totally missing God. And so finally one day what God did is he came up to a guy named Abraham and he said, hey, Abraham, I'm gonna use you to create a family which will become a nation called Israel. And through Israel, I'm going to make my name known to the whole world. Like, they're going to look at me. They're going to look at your nation, Israel, and see myself and my mighty hand in this little piddly pipsqueak of a nation. And they're going to see my God and my mighty power in it. And even today, I can look back, and one of my most confident things in faith is I can look over and see a little nation that's a speck on a map over in the middle of nowhere and see how people come for and people come against it and how God has maintained that nation when it shouldn't be here. Like, the nation of Israel is a testament to God's power himself. And because I've got the history of a nation to look back on, I can look at God's story and I can understand it and I can trust it more than just if I had a crazy aunt or uncle that told me that that's what it was supposed to be. See, God knew he wouldn't believe people, so he said he created a history for us to believe. Ain't that crazy? And what God did, this is what makes the Bible so much more incredible, is like that God just didn't write this book and leave it out here on a rock for somebody to find. But he used like dozens of authors through thousands of years in like many different languages to tie his story together like perfectly. And like things that were written about Jesus hundreds and thousands of years before he even showed up, like Jesus fulfilled them perfectly. And things like Jesus said like 2,000 years ago are getting still worked together just so beautifully. And like that in and of itself, like this book is a miracle. And like the crazy thing is that we don't even take time to read it a lot of times. But through Israel, God said, I'm going to make my name known through the nations. And through Israel, our hope of Jesus eventually came. Now, some of you, y'all know when I go to the whiteboard, it gets crazy and it gets interesting. And I just want to clear something up with Israel because, like, I know I had this hang up. And so that's why I'm being very honest with y'all this morning. I had this hang up, and I don't want y'all to have it. I read the Bible for years and years and years, and all I read about was Israel. And I was like, well, I'm American. But, this is my thought process. And I'm like, what's Israel got to do with me, Lord? Like, why are you always talking about Israel? Like, when I don't get it. I'm American. And, but what I want you to understand, and this same thing I'm writing up here is going to be over there on the screen to your, over there. There you go. Alright. Alright. By the way, shout out to Ms. Tyson for getting me some new markers last Sunday. Alright. So the thing about God is that this book, and people don't realize that the Bible is a story in and of itself. And y'all know how Jesus like went around and told stories when he was here and stuff? God has told a story through the nation of Israel and he's been telling it for thousands and thousands of years. You see, it's just so big and so vast in history that we lose the story. You see, because God looked down at Abraham when he created it, and he said, Abraham, I'm going to do something through you. And he looked at the nation, he said, I'm going to call this nation Israel. In my name, I will be their God, and they will be my people. Like he created Israel out of nothing. And he said, man, you're out of everything, you're going to be my pride and joy. Israel was created to be God's pride and joy. Now, this is the crazy thing about Israel. They didn't take long to screw it up. Matter of fact, they got when they were slaves in Egypt, they got brought out of Egypt as slaves. God had just splitted the Red Sea and stuff, and people were already whining and complaining and worshiping other gods. Israel very quickly fell away from being God's pride and joy. That was God's plan for them, but they didn't want it. They didn't take it. God wanted nothing more. It says in Isaiah, I want nothing more than to gather you like hens under my wings and protect you, and just protect you like a mother hen does her chicks, but you won't do it. And they fell away. And can you imagine how much that hurt God? God looked down at this nation who he created to be just such a blessing. As his children, he promised them the world, and they rejected him. And a lot of what the Old Testament is about God telling the nation of Israel how they hurt him and how they betrayed him. And even says, he compares it to a husband whose bride goes out and cheats on him with another man. And husbands, or spouses, if you can imagine the betrayal that must feel like, that's how heartbroken he was at that. It still blows my mind that we can make God upset and cry. But yeah, even though God was hurt and angry, felt betrayed, God gave him patience and he gave him kindness they didn't deserve. And a lot of the rest of the parts of the Old Testament is about God giving them patience and giving them second chances and third chances and fourth chances. And you sit there and you read and you're like, how can this nation be this stupid and this ignorant? God has done all these miracles in their life and they just won't listen to him. What is their problem? And then you look and you see God is hurting he is, and you're like, Lord, just wipe them out and be done with them. They don't deserve it. After all they've done for you, and you can't just get them out, God. I'm with you, Lord. These people are ignorant. But yet God continued to give them patience and kindness. And then 2,000 years ago, through the nation of Israel, one of their own sons became a king, and his name was Jesus. Through the lineage of Israelites and the Hebrew people, Jesus was born into. That was his physical traits. And Jesus will be their hope. And Jesus would be their chance to get back right with God. Through Jesus, God gave Israel a new promise. He said, guys, you have been screwing it up your way, and I realize that you just can't do this on your own. So I'm going to give you Jesus. And just by believing in him, you can be saved and you can be brought right with me. Now, you know the cool thing about Israel's story. I mean, God's a storyteller. God's been telling your story through the nation of Israel for thousands and thousands of years. God's a God of that loves symbolism. As Jesus told a story about farmers planting seeds and growing, and he compared that to faith and planting faith and letting it grow up in fruit. God the Father was telling the story of Him bringing you back to Himself through the nation of Israel. You see, we just lose it in history because it's so big and it's so grand. Because this is our story. And not our story. Point yourself. Say your story. Because God created you to be His pride and joy. There's nothing else in this world that He wants more than you. There's nothing that brings Him greater glory. There's nothing that brings Him greater joy. And you, I'm talking to you as individuals, are His greatest creation. You're the apple of His eye, just like the nation of Israel was supposed to be. And you fell away, and you hurt God. And you know how you can't just get it some weeks? How you try and you try and you try and you strive for perfection, but you get frustrated because you just can't quite be the standard that God expects from you, and you'll never get there. God gives you way more patience and way more kindness than you'll ever deserve. Every time God saved the nation of Israel and gave them just one more chance, He was giving it to you. God gives us more patience and more kindness than we ever deserve every day. And because He loves us, because we're His pride and joy, He gave us the New Testament, the New Covenant, the New Promise, which is the rest of the Bible, which is talking about His hope for you in Jesus and the new life you have in Jesus. God gave you Jesus when you couldn't save yourself. That's the Bible in a nutshell. That history lesson that you've been reading about in Israel and never understanding, that history lesson is God's greatest story being told to you. That New Testament, like from Jesus onward, that's God's new promise to you. That's God's new promise in saying that yeah, y'all don't deserve it, but I'm giving you Jesus, and you know what? I'm forgetting the past. Today's a new day, and I'm going to teach you how to live like Jesus lives. I'm going to teach you to be my children. Finally. You see this book right here. As much as it is, yeah, it's got history. It's got ancestry in it. It's got battles. It's got different characters. It's got kingdoms rising and falling. It's got Jesus speaking. It's got apostles preaching. It's got every single thing. But you know what? All that thing boils down to a daddy's letter to his kids saying, here's how much I love you. And here's how to come back to me if you want to get back. I love you enough to work together this book. It's your daddy's love story to you. And you know what's tough? We don't even read this. I mean, there's days go by that I say I have something important to do, more important to do than read this. tell you something. Treasure this. Like we live in such blessed times to be able to just pick up this book and not take someone else's word for it, but to read how much He loves us. Don't take it for granted. If you don't have a Bible, there's Bibles out there on that table after this service. You pick one up. It's free. If you want to carry around a Bible, get that out. But don't take this for granted. They're going to come out here and close this out. Lord, as they're coming up here to close this out, Lord, I just ask that you, one, God, thank you for always doing more than what we can put our eyes around or put our hearts around. God, you just, in our weakest mess, God, you're always more, God. There's no way I could have written that word, Lord, like you did. God, help us to treasure your word and see it as your promises to us, Lord. Lord, don't let us take it for granted, God, but help us read it. Help us understand it and help us see it for what it is, God, and help us see your love for us as what it is. God, make us your children, make us your little boys and your little girls. Help us to make you our daddy. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Well.
loved you enough to write it for them. So at least we can do to read it. I love you. We love you. God loves you. Have a good Sunday.